Why do you keep avoiding me?" "Single dad," CO asked him. She blocked the door before I could leave. Her hand pressed against the frame, and she looked at me with eyes that wouldn't let me lie anymore. "Why do you keep avoiding me, Jonathan?" The question hung in the air between us. I stood there in her office, frozen while the city lights shined behind us through big windows. The office was empty. Everyone had gone home. Nobody would know we were alone. My mouth went dry. "I'm not avoiding you, Rose." "Yes, you are." She stepped closer. "Every time we're in the same meeting, you leave early. Every time I try to talk to you, you disappear." I wanted to argue, but the word stuck in my throat because she was right. 4 months now, I've been doing exactly that. Running, hiding, pretending I didn't feel what I felt every time I saw her. But it wasn't just about feelings. It was about Marcus and his threats, Eleanor and her lawyers, Susan and keeping her safe. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. Let me back up. My name is Jonathan. I'm a single dad to a 7-year-old girl named Susan. I work for one of Portland's biggest tech companies. And the woman blocking my way, that's Rose, my CEO, the woman I'm supposed to stay away from, the woman I can't stop thinking about. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you are tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. 3 months ago, everything was different. I was one of Rose's favorite employees. She called me into meetings. She asked for my opinion on projects. She smiled at me in the hallway, and I smiled back. I thought maybe, just maybe, something could happen between us. I was wrong. Not because she didn't feel the same way, but because Marcus Carter made sure nothing could ever happen. Marcus is the VP of Operations. He's been with the company for 15 years. He thinks he should be CEO instead of Rose. He thinks she's too young, too soft, too female to run a tech company. He's been waiting for her to fail since the day she got promoted 2 years ago. And he decided I was going to help him make that happen. It started with a simple email. He wanted to meet me for coffee. Said he had some questions about the new software project I was leading. I thought it was normal. Senior management checking in on important work. I was stupid. We met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. Marcus wore his expensive suit and his fake smile. He ordered a black coffee and got straight to the point. He told me he knew Rose had a soft spot for me. He said everyone in the office could see it. He said it was unprofessional and it made me look weak. I told him there was nothing between us. He laughed. He said it didn't matter what was true. It mattered what people believed. Then he showed me his phone. He had photos. Photos of Rose and me in the parking lot after work talking by our cars. Photos of us at the company holiday party, standing too close. Photos of us in the break room laughing at something stupid. Normal photos. Innocent photos. But Marcus said he could make them look like something else. He told me what he wanted. Access to the software codes I was working on. The new security system Rose was planning to launch next quarter. He said if I gave him the codes, he'd leave me alone. If I didn't, he'd send the photos to HR and make sure I got fired for inappropriate workplace behavior. And he'd make sure Rose got investigated too. I told him to go to hell. He smiled and said I had 48 hours to think about it. That was 3 months ago. Since then, my life has been a nightmare. I stopped talking to Rose. I stopped going to meetings unless I absolutely had to. I made myself invisible because I knew Marcus was watching everything I did, every conversation, every email, every moment. I couldn't risk giving him more ammunition. I couldn't risk hurting Rose's reputation. So I disappeared. But disappearing came with a cost. Rose started asking questions. She asked my coworkers if I was okay. She sent me emails asking if she'd done something wrong. She tried to corner me in the hallway, but I always found an excuse to leave. I could see the confusion in her eyes. The hurt. She thought I was rejecting her. She thought I didn't care. The truth was the opposite. I cared too much. And that's exactly why I had to stay away. Marcus didn't stop with just one threat. Every week, he found a new way to remind me he was watching. He'd walk past my desk and drop a printed photo on my keyboard. He'd send me text messages late at night with timestamps of when Rose and I were in the building at the same time. He was building a case. He was collecting evidence. And he was waiting for me to slip up. The worst part wasn't the blackmail. The worst part was watching Rose change. She used to be confident and bright. She used to walk into rooms like she owned them. But as the weeks went by and I kept avoiding her, I saw that confidence start to crack. She started doubting herself. She started asking if people respected her. She started working longer hours to prove something to people who didn't deserve her effort. And it was my fault. My distance made her think she was a problem. I wanted to tell her the truth. I wanted to explain everything. But I couldn't, because Marcus wasn't my only problem. There was someone else making my life hell. Someone who wanted to take the only thing that mattered to me. My daughter. Eleanor Hastings is my ex-mother-in-law. She's 63 years old, and she's never forgiven me for marrying her daughter. My ex-wife died 4 years ago in a car accident. It was sudden and terrible, and it destroyed me. But it destroyed Eleanor even more. She lost her only child. And in her grief, she decided that I was responsible, not for the accident, but for everything else. Eleanor believes I'm a bad father. She believes Susan would be better off living with her in her big house in the suburbs instead of with me in my small apartment downtown. She believes my job takes up too much of my time. She believes I'm selfish and neglectful and unfit. And for the past year, she's been trying to prove it in court. The custody battle started small. Eleanor filed for visitation rights. She wanted Susan every weekend. I agreed because I thought it was reasonable. Susan loved her grandmother. I didn't want to keep them apart. But Eleanor didn't stop there. She started documenting everything. Every time I worked late. Every time Susan came to her house with a bruise from playing at the park. Every time I forgot to pack an extra change of clothes. She was building a case to take Susan away from me permanently. Her lawyers were good. They knew how to twist things. They made my job sound dangerous. They made my apartment sound unlivable. They made me sound like a workaholic who didn't care about his daughter. It wasn't true. Susan was my whole world. But in court, the truth didn't matter as much as the story. And Eleanor's lawyers were very good at telling stories. The worst part was that Eleanor wasn't wrong about everything. I did work long hours. I did bring Susan to the office, sometimes when I couldn't find a babysitter. I did miss school events because of meetings I couldn't reschedule. I wasn't perfect. I was doing my best. But my best wasn't always enough. And Eleanor knew it. 3 weeks ago, Eleanor showed up at my office. I was in a meeting with Rose and 2 other managers when my assistant knocked on the door. She looked nervous. She said there was someone in the lobby asking for me. I excused myself and went downstairs. Eleanor was sitting in the waiting area with her expensive purse and her judgmental eyes. She smiled when she saw me. It wasn't a kind smile. She said she was in the neighborhood and thought she'd stop by to see where I spent all my time. She said she wanted to understand my work environment so she could explain it to the judge. She looked around the office like she was taking notes. She asked my assistant how many hours I worked each week. She asked if I ever brought Susan to the office. She was gathering evidence. Right there in front of everyone. And there was nothing I could do to stop her. Rose saw Eleanor in the lobby. She asked me later who the woman was. I lied. I said she was a client. Rose didn't believe me. I could see it in her face. But she didn't push. She just looked at me with those eyes that saw too much and walked away. That was the moment I realized I couldn't keep both parts of my life separate anymore. Marcus was threatening my career. Eleanor was threatening my family. And Rose was caught in the middle without even knowing it. The custody hearing was scheduled for next month. Eleanor's lawyers had filed new motions. They wanted full custody. They claimed I was unstable. They claimed I was hiding things. They claimed Susan wasn't safe with me. My lawyer said we had a chance to fight it, but we needed evidence that I was a good father. We needed character witnesses. We needed proof that Susan was happy and healthy and thriving. But how could I prove that when I was barely holding my life together? I started taking photos of everything. Susan eating breakfast. Susan doing her homework. Susan laughing at cartoons. I kept receipts from every grocery store trip and every doctor's appointment. I documented every moment of our life together because I knew Eleanor's lawyers would try to twist everything into something ugly. I was exhausted. I was paranoid, and I was running out of time. The worst part was lying to Susan. She asked me why Grandma Eleanor kept asking weird questions. She asked me why we had to go to court. She asked me if she did something wrong. I told her everything was fine. I told her grown-ups just had to work some things out. I told her she didn't need to worry. But kids are smarter than we think. Susan knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how bad it really was. Marcus found out about the custody battle. I don't know how. Maybe he hired someone to follow me. Maybe he saw me leaving work early for court dates. But he found out, and he used it against me. He sent me a text message with a photo of me outside the courthouse. The message said one word: unstable. He was threatening to send evidence of my legal problems to HR. He was threatening to make me look like a liability. He was threatening everything. I realized then that Marcus and Eleanor were two sides of the same coin. They both wanted to destroy me. They both thought I didn't deserve what I had. And they were both willing to do whatever it took to win. I was trapped. I couldn't fight both of them at the same time. I couldn't protect Rose and Susan and myself all at once. Something had to give. And I was terrified it was going to be everything. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I remember because Susan had a school play that afternoon, and I'd promised her I'd be there. I'd blocked out my entire calendar. I'd told my team I was unavailable. I'd done everything right. But Marcus had other plans. He called an emergency meeting at 2 o'clock. He said it was mandatory for all senior staff. He said Rose needed everyone there to discuss a security breach in our system. I knew it was a trap. There was no security breach. He was testing me. He wanted to see if I'd choose work over my daughter. He wanted proof that I was a neglectful father Eleanor claimed I was. I went to the meeting. I had to. If I didn't show up, Marcus would report me to HR for insubordination. If I did show up, I'd miss Susan's play. I couldn't win. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Marcus dragged it out on purpose. He asked pointless questions. He made people repeat information. He kept checking his watch and smiling at me like he knew exactly what he was doing. Rose looked confused. She kept asking why we needed to cover things we'd already discussed. Marcus ignored her. By the time the meeting ended, it was past 5 o'clock. Susan's play was over. I'd missed it. I drove to the school anyway. I found Susan sitting outside the auditorium with her teacher. She was still wearing her costume, a paper crown and a purple cape. She looked so small. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She just asked why I didn't come. I told her I got stuck at work. She said it was okay, but I could see in her eyes that it wasn't okay. I'd broken another promise. I'd let her down again. And Eleanor's lawyers would hear about it by morning. That night, Marcus sent me an email. It had photos attached. Photos of me in the meeting while Susan's play was happening. Photos with timestamps. He didn't write anything else. He didn't have to. The message was clear. He owned me. He could make me choose between my job and my daughter whenever he wanted, and there was nothing I could do about it. I sat in my apartment that night after Susan went to bed, and I realized I couldn't keep going like this. I was losing both battles. Marcus was winning. Eleanor was winning. And I was destroying myself trying to fight them alone. I needed help. But the only person who could help me was the one person I'd been avoiding, Rose. The next day, Marcus made his final move. He called me into his office and closed the door. He showed me his phone. He had security footage from the office. Footage of Rose and me talking in the parking lot. Footage of her touching my arm. Footage of us standing close by the elevator. Normal workplace interactions edited together to look like something inappropriate. He said he'd already sent copies to 3 board members. He said they were concerned about Rose's judgment. He said if I didn't give him the software codes by Monday, he'd send the footage to everyone. The board, the employees, the media. He'd destroy Rose's career and blame it on me. I told him I'd given the codes. I didn't know what else to say. He smiled and told me I was making the smart choice. Then he said one more thing. He said Eleanor's lawyers had contacted him. They wanted a statement about my work performance. They wanted to know if I was reliable and stable. Marcus said he'd be happy to tell them the truth, that I was distracted, unprofessional, involved in an inappropriate relationship with my boss. He'd destroy me at work and in court at the same time. I left his office feeling like I couldn't breathe. I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall and tried not to break down. I'd lost. Marcus had won. There was no way out. I'd have to give him the codes. I'd have to betray Rose. I'd have to watch her company get sabotaged. And I'd probably lose Susan anyway because Eleanor's lawyers had too much ammunition. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rose. Her office. Now, I thought Marcus had already sent her the footage. I thought she was going to fire me. I thought it was over. I walked to her office like a man walking to his execution. But when I got there, Rose wasn't angry. She was worried. She closed the door and looked at me like she'd been looking at me for months, like she could see through all my lies. She asked me what was going on. She said she'd been watching me fall apart for months, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. She said she knew something was wrong. She said she wanted to help. I almost told her everything. But then I remembered Marcus's threats. If I told Rose, he'd release the footage. If I stayed quiet, maybe I could protect her a little longer. So I lied. I said I was fine. I said I'd been dealing with some personal stuff, but it was handled. I said she didn't need to worry. Rose didn't believe me. She stepped closer. She said she knew I was lying. She said she could see it in my eyes. Then she said something that broke me. She said she thought we were friends. She said she missed me. She said she didn't understand why I was pushing her away. And I realized in that moment that I couldn't keep lying to her. Not anymore. Not when she was looking at me like that. I told her everything. I told her about Marcus and the blackmail. I told her about Eleanor and the custody battle. I told her about the threats and the surveillance and impossible choices. I told her I'd been avoiding her to protect her. I told her I was supposed to give Marcus the software codes by Monday or he'd destroy both of us. I told her I didn't know what to do. And then I said the thing I'd been too scared to say for months. I told her I cared about her too much to let Marcus use me to hurt her. Rose listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she didn't look scared or angry. She looked determined. She asked me if I had proof of Marcus's blackmail. I showed her the emails and text messages I'd been saving. She asked me about Eleanor's custody case. I told her about the hearing next month. Then Rose did something I didn't expect. She smiled. Not a happy smile. A dangerous smile. She said we were going to fix this. Both of us. Together. She said Marcus made a mistake. He thought I was alone. He thought I was weak. But he was wrong. Because now he wasn't just fighting me. He was fighting her too. Rose didn't waste time. The next morning, she called her lawyer. Not the company's lawyer. Her personal lawyer. A woman named Patricia, who specialized in corporate fraud and harassment cases. Patricia listened to everything and said we had a case against Marcus. The blackmail, the threats, the surveillance. It was all illegal. but she said we needed more evidence. We needed to catch Marcus actually doing something criminal. Just having his text messages wasn't enough. Rose came up with a plan. She said I should tell Marcus I'd give him the codes. We'd arrange a meeting, but instead of giving him real codes, we'd give him fake ones. Ones that looked real, but didn't actually work. And while he tried to use them, we'd document everything. Patricia said if we could prove Marcus tried to steal company property, we could have him arrested. It was risky. If Marcus figured out the codes were fake, he'd release the footage and destroy us both. But it was our only shot. We spent the weekend preparing. Rose worked with her IT team to create fake codes that looked legitimate. I practiced what I'd say to Marcus to make him believe I'd given up. Patricia prepared legal documents for an emergency restraining order in case things went wrong. And Rose did one more thing. She called her contacts at the family court and asked them to investigate Eleanor's case. She told them about the harassment, the manipulation, the way Eleanor was using the custody battle to destroy me. Rose said if we could prove Eleanor had ulterior motives, we might be able to stop the hearing entirely. Monday morning came. I met Marcus in his office at 9. I handed him a USB drive with the fake codes. He looked at me like he'd won. He said I made the right choice. He said he'd delete the footage and leave me alone now. I knew he was lying. Men like Marcus don't keep their promises. But I nodded and left. An hour later, Patricia got a call from building security. Marcus had tried to access Rose's secure server using the codes I gave him. The system logged the attempt and flagged it as unauthorized access. We had him. Patricia moved fast. She filed a police report for corporate espionage. She filed a civil suit for blackmail and harassment. She got an emergency court order to seize Marcus's phone and computer. By noon, Marcus was being escorted out of the building by security and 2 police officers. He tried to argue. He tried to say it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was clear. He'd attempted to steal proprietary information. He'd blackmailed an employee. He was done. Rose called an emergency company meeting that afternoon. She stood in front of everyone and explained what happened. She said Marcus had been engaging in illegal activities and was no longer with the company. She said the investigation was ongoing and anyone who felt uncomfortable could speak to HR confidentially. She didn't mention me by name. She didn't mention the blackmail. She protected me even while she exposed him. That's the kind of person Rose is. But we weren't done yet. Eleanor was still a problem. The custody hearing was in 2 weeks. Patricia suggested we go on the offensive. She said instead of just offending against Eleanor's claims, we should file our own motion. We'd claim Eleanor was using the legal system to harass me. We'd submit evidence of her showing up at my workplace, her constant surveillance, her attempts to manipulate Susan. We'd paint her as the unstable one. It was risky, but after what we'd just done to Marcus, I felt like maybe I could win this too. Rose did something else that surprised me. She offered to be a character witness at the hearing. She said she'd testify about what kind of employee and father I was. She said she'd explain how I always put Susan first, how I talked about her constantly, how I kept her drawing on my desk. Rose said she'd tell the judge that I was one of the most dedicated parents she'd ever met. I tried to tell her she didn't have to do that. She said she wanted to. She said that's what friends do. They show up. The custody hearing happened 2 weeks later. Eleanor's lawyers came prepared with their evidence and their accusations. They talked about my long work hours. They talked about me missing Susan's play. They tried to paint me as neglectful and unstable. But then Patricia called her witnesses. My neighbors testified that Susan was always happy and well cared for. Susan's teacher testified that I never missed a parent-teacher conference. And Rose testified that I was one of the most responsible and caring people she knew. The judge listened to everything. Then he asked to speak to Susan privately. She was 7 years old, but she was smart. She told the judge she loved her grandmother, but she wanted to live with me. She said, I made her breakfast every morning. She said I helped her with homework. She said I tucked her in every night. She said Grandma Eleanor made her feel bad about loving me. The judge came back and made his ruling. He denied Eleanor's petition for full custody. He said the evidence showed I was a fit parent. He said Eleanor could continue supervised visitation, but nothing more. I'd won. Eleanor left the courtroom without looking at me. Her lawyers tried to say they'd appeal, but Patricia said they wouldn't. They knew they'd lost. Susan hugged me in the hallway and asked if everything was okay now. I told her yes. Everything was okay, and for the first time in months, I actually believed it. Rose was waiting outside the courthouse. She'd taken the afternoon off to be there. When she saw me, she smiled, not the dangerous smile from before. A real smile, a happy smile. She asked how it went. I told her we won. She hugged me right there on the courthouse steps. It wasn't a professional hug. It was the kind of hug you give someone when you're genuinely happy for them, when you care about them, when you've been fighting beside them, and you finally get to celebrate. We went back to the office together. Things were different now. I didn't avoid her anymore. I didn't make excuses to leave meetings. I didn't hide. Marcus was gone. Eleanor was done. The threats were over. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Rose and I started having lunch together. We talked about work and life and Susan. She met my daughter one weekend at a company picnic. Susan liked her. She said Rose was pretty and nice. She asked if Rose was my girlfriend. I told her we were friends. Susan said that was good. She said I needed more friends. Maybe she was right, or maybe she was wrong, because over the next few weeks, Rose and I got closer. We stayed late at the office working on projects. We texted each other stupid jokes during boring meetings. We started finishing each other's sentences. It felt easy, natural, like it was always supposed to be this way. One night, we were the last ones in the office. Rose was at her desk, and I was sitting across from her. She looked up and asked if I ever thought about what could have happened if Marcus hadn't blackmailed me. If Eleanor hadn't started the custody battle, if things had been different. I told her I thought about it all the time. She asked what I would have done. I said I would have asked her to dinner. Somewhere nice. Somewhere we could talk without worrying about who was watching. She smiled and said it wasn't too late. She said we could still go to dinner. I said I'd like that. She said she would too. So we went, that weekend, just the two of us. We talked for 3 hours, about everything, about nothing, about how strange it was that the worst months of my life led to this moment. Sitting across from her, finally able to be honest, finally able to stop pretending. At the end of the night, I walked her to her car. She thanked me for dinner. I thanked her for everything, for believing me, for fighting with me, for not giving up when I tried to push her away. She said she wasn't going to let me push her away anymore. She said I was stuck with her now. I said that sounded perfect. She kissed me, right there in the parking lot. It was soft and sweet, and everything I'd been too scared to hope for. When she pulled away, she was smiling. She said she'd been wanting to do that for months. I said me too. Things changed after that. Rose and I started dating. Officially, we didn't hide it. We didn't sneak around. We were honest with everyone. Some people at work had opinions. Some people thought it was inappropriate. But Rose said she didn't care. She said we weren't doing anything wrong. We were two adults who cared about each other. And if people had a problem with that, they could take it up with HR. Nobody did. Susan loved Rose. They bonded over silly things. Baking cookies, watching cartoons, painting nails. Rose was good with kids. She was patient and kind, and she never tried to replace Susan's mom. She just became someone important in Susan's life. Someone who cared. Someone who showed up. And that was enough. Marcus tried to sue the company. He claimed wrongful termination. His lawyer argued that the evidence against him was fabricated. But Patricia destroyed him in court. She had timestamps. She had security footage. She had my testimony. Marcus lost. He was ordered to pay legal fees. Last I heard, he was working for a small startup in California. Far away from us. Far away from Rose. Good riddance. Eleanor stopped trying to contact me. She sent one letter apologizing for everything. She said grief made her do things she regretted. She said she hoped someday Susan would forgive her. I didn't respond. Maybe someday I'd be ready to forgive her. But not yet. The wounds were still too fresh. Susan still saw her twice a month for supervised visits. But that was it. Eleanor didn't push for more. She'd learned her lesson. A year later, Rose and I were still together, still happy, still figuring things out. She moved in with me and Susan. We got a bigger apartment, one with enough space for all of us. Susan got her own room. Rose set up a home office. I finally felt like I could relax, like I didn't have to look over my shoulder anymore, like the nightmare was really over. One night, Rose and I were sitting on the couch after Susan went to bed. Rose asked me if I ever regretted everything that happened. I said no. She looked surprised. She said I went through hell. I lost months of sleep. I almost lost my daughter. How could I not regret it? I told her because it led me here. To her, to this life, to this moment. I said if I had to go through it all again to end up here, I would. She said that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. I said I meant it. She leaned against me, and we sat there in comfortable silence. The kind of silence you can only have with someone who really knows you. Someone who's seen you at your worst and stayed anyway. Someone who fought beside you when you thought you had to fight alone. Rose was that person for me. And I'd spend the rest of my life making sure she knew how much that meant. Susan came out of her room an hour later. She couldn't sleep. She climbed onto the couch between us and asked if we could watch a movie. Rose said yes. We put on some animated film about talking animals. Susan fell asleep halfway through. Rose looked at me over Susan's head and smiled. This was my life now. Messy and imperfect and beautiful. And I wouldn't change a single thing. This story teaches us several important lessons about facing our problems instead of running from them. First, isolation makes everything worse. Jonathan thought he was protecting Rose and Susan by handling everything alone, but his silence actually hurt the people he loved and made him an easier target for his enemies. Second, bullies and manipulators like Marcus and Eleanor thrive when their victims stay quiet. The moment Jonathan exposed their tactics and found allies, their power disappeared. Third, asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Jonathan spent months suffering because he believed he had to be strong enough to handle everything by himself. But real strength came when he trusted Rose enough to be vulnerable and honest. Fourth, the people who truly care about you want to stand beside you in hard times, not watch from the sidelines. Rose didn't run when she learned about Jonathan's problems. She fought harder. Finally, this story reminds us that our worst seasons often lead to our greatest blessings. If Jonathan hadn't gone through this nightmare, he never would have discovered who his real allies were, never would have built a deep trust with Rose that became the foundation of their relationship, and never would have learned that he didn't have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders alone. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And here's what I need to know. Do you want part 2?